Burns Night 2017, Who was Robert Burns and what is the best haggis recipe? Burns Night, held in honour of Scotland's most famous poet Robert Burns, is celebrated at the end of January every year, but what is this all about? The night is a way to remember the life of the 18th century bard, and it falls on his birthday, January 25th. The tradition started a few years after the poet's death in 1796, when his friends commemorated his career on the date of his death, July 21st, each year. So began the Burns Supper, and more than 2 centuries later it has become a nationwide event with recitals of the poet's works and a haggis dinner. Who was Robert Burns? Robert Burns was a Scottish poet and lyricist who is widely regarded as the national poet of Scotland. Of all the poets who have written in the Scottish language, Burns is most well known, although much of his writing is also in Standard English and a light Scots dialect. Burns, also known as Rabbi Burns, the Bard of Ayrshire and various other names and epithets, is considered to be a pioneer of the Romantic movement. After his death he became a great source of inspiration to the founders of both liberalism and socialism, and a cultural icon in Scotland and among the Scottish diaspora around the world. Celebration of his life and work became almost a national charismatic cult during the 19th and 20th centuries, and his influence has long been strong on Scottish literature. In 2009 he was chosen as the greatest Scot by the Scottish public in a vote run by Scottish television channel STV, narrowly beating William Braveheart Wallace. Robert Burns wrote Auld Lang Syne, sort of. Robert Burns didn't invent Auld Lang Syne as we know it, rather he was the first person to write down a much older Scottish folk song. In the late 1700s he sent it for inclusion in a book of old Scottish songs, noting, "I took it down from an old man." The poem, and song, Auld Lang Syne is often sung at Hogmanay, New Year's Eve, and Scotsway served for a long time as an unofficial national anthem of the country. Burns collected folk songs from across Scotland, often revising or adopting them, as well as making original compositions. Other poems and songs of Burns that remain well known across the world today include The Red, Red Rose, A Man's a Man for That, To a Louse, To a Mouse, The Battle of Sharamure, Tam O'Shanter, and A Fond Kiss. How is Burns Night celebrated? By wearing a kilt? Whether or not Burns would have worn kilts is still disputed, with some arguing that as a Lowlander he would not have worn them, although he was a champion of the right to wear traditional dress. The full ritual of the night involves whiskey, haggis and poetry readings. Those who partake are piped in, and then the Selkirk Grace, the prayer of thanks attributed to Burns, is said before dinner. The prayer goes: "Some he meat and canna eat, and some wad eat that want it. But we he meat, we can eat. See, let the Lord be thanked." What's on the Burns Night menu? A traditional Burns supper starts with soup, often a Scottish broth. The haggis is then served with turnips and potatoes, known as neeps and tatties if you're a true Scot. The haggis, typically carried on a silver salver, is also piped in by the diners with a standing slow clap. It is the great chief to know their puddin' race according to the address to the haggis. During the address, also written by Burns, the speaker draws a knife and at the line "and cut you up we're ready" slate, cuts the dish open. Once all the fanfare is over, the guests toast the haggis and tuck in. Burns supper toasts. The meal is followed by the immortal memory toast, in which a guest gives a speech in honor of the great poet. Then a toast to the lassies, once a chance to thank the women cooking the meal. It is now the humorous highlight to the evening. A male diner offers an amusing but complimentary take on the role of woman in general life, taking in quotes from Burns's works and referring to women in the group. Any man making the toast should tread with care, since it is followed by a reply from the women. The rest of the night is filled with a vote of thanks and guests performing works by Burns, ending with the Auld Lang Syne. The group stand and holds hands to sing it. Recipes for a Burns Night supper. Kakaliki soup. Kakaliki soup is a delicious start to a Burns night supper. Haggis, red berry sauce, bashed neeps and chapatati's recipe. Robert Burns believed in sharing simple, wholesome food, so you can't go wrong with haggis. If a traditional haggis recipe is too much of a stretch, try Mackey's haggis-flavored crisps as nibbles for your party. That counts, right? Individual mutton pies. Andy Rose, executive chef of Boysdale Restaurant, shares a recipe for individual mutton pies, ideal for Burns night. Crenachin. This Scottish dessert is perfect for rounding off Burns night.